Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and today, that is, my channel is Discerning What is True, and today is the 27th day of December 2022. And what I'm going to be doing tonight is be reading from the Redemption Manual 4.5. We're beginning with what I call the history of Andrew Jackson and the bank. Well, what this whole thing is about, Redemption 4.5, is a way of you be able to understand the history of how this country has been. The people have been deceived, thinking they're free, when in reality they're not free. And they did have some freedoms at first, but it's been gradually taken away as a frog is gradually the water's heated up to eventually that he passes away. So I wanted to read that tonight. We'll see how far we go. It's about 10:25 here on the East Coast, and I just wanted to. I started this last week, and I haven't finished it. I've been working on another particular book, which is Tavistock, which is a book I really enjoy. Um, as Mr. Coleman is, what I would call it. Let's see. Let's see. We got an issue here. So here we go. This basically simply is how to free yourself. So we're going to start there and go from there. Okay. So Andrew Jackson and the bank. President Andrew Jackson put an end to the Second Charter in 1836. If you recall, the history is that they had a charter for 20 years under Alexander Hamilton. And then we had the issue of Britain getting involved in the War of 1812, which is actually was trying to eliminate this whole the 13th missing 13th Amendment that very few people even know about, was to deal with what we call esquires that were not going to be allowed to pursue political office. Didn't know that, did you? So we're going to start here with Mr. Jackson, and so they're going to try to do it in 1836, and Jackson begins to go a war between that situation. So Jackson's reasoning was simple. The Constitution does not delegate authority for Congress to establish a national bank. Jackson's rationale has never been seriously challenged, and the Constitution has never been amended to authorize Congress to establish a national bank. Yeah, if they want to do this, they could use an amendment, you know, but the problem is simply this: is that they don't want to do that. They want to come in through the back door. If they wanted a national bank, why isn't it in the Constitution? They try to use what I call loopholes. You see, but anyway, let's continue. There was not a national bank established in America for more than 75 years until 1913, with the Federal Reserve Bank, which is not a federal bank, is not it's not a bank actually. It's a group of private bankers who siphon off of the toil of the people and steal from them. And you're seeing it very evident right now with the massive inflation that's taking place. And it's not going to get any better, folks. They continue to spend money as though there's no way of getting away. So this is a remedy. This whole thing with Redemption Manual 4.5 is a remedy in a way to get out of that system. But in order to do that, you need to know the history of how we got ourselves in this situation. Okay? So Andrew Jackson did an excellent job. What did Congress do with Andrew Jackson? They impeached him. Is that because Congress is made of mostly of attorneys? Who do the attorneys have a title of nobility to? The Crown of England. You see. So Congress is populated by attorneys who are esquires or title of nobility to the Crown of England. The gentleman did this work many years ago, back in the 80s, I think it was. David Dodge. Look it up, missing 13th Amendment. So who does our Congress represent or represent? The bankers, the physical agents of the crown. The bankers hired an assassin to kill Andrew Jackson using two pistols. However, the plot failed. as both pistols misfired. Andrew Jackson violated Andrew Jackson violated public international law because he denied the creditor his just lien rights on the debtor. However, the bankers did not lend value, that is substance, so in actuality, they had an unperfected lien, and therefore the law actually did not apply. Andrew Jackson stated, controlling our currency, receiving our public money, and holding thousands of our citizens' independence would be more formidable and dangerous than a military power of the enemy. As we continue on, here we go to the Civil War. In 1860 to 61, the Southern states, that is the representatives of the original signatures of the Social Compact, walked out of Congress. They created Sine Die, that is S-I-N-E-D, it's Latin. Abraham Lincoln was elected president. Some more extra history to help you here to understand. There were 4 candidates running for office for president. This enabled Lincoln to actually win. There was a representative from the Midwest, a representative of the South, and then there was it basically divided the votes of the other 3 candidates and allowed Lincoln to win, which did not receive a majority of the vote. It was all done on purpose, you see. Things like this are done on purpose, okay? Okay, so slavery was only a window dressing for the Civil War. The war had nothing to do with slavery. It has to do with states, the right of the present living posterity of the original signatories to the Social Compact to alter or abolish the form of government which their forefathers established for themselves and their posterity. Rights in the national debt to the creditor fiscal agent, that is, the bankers. The South wanted to be redeemed from the crown in England. The North wanted to remain under their dominion and their debt. That's what they're saying here. When the posterity of the member states of the South ordered their representatives to walk out of Congress, this ended the public side of bifurcated constitution as far as the Republican form of government was concerned. What remained of the government was the private side, the democracy. The remaining mob of illegitimate members of the congressional body of agents who have breached the organic social compact known as the U.S. Constitution, which the beneficiaries of the original signatures of the trust so established for their posterity, fostered upon them under the rule of the physical agents of the crown bankers. During and after the Civil War, the original 13th Amendment was replaced and a new 13th Amendment was issued, first by executive order and then erected, that is enacted under martial law on December 18, 1865. The 14th Amendment was enacted similarly on July 28, 1868. The 15th Amendment enacted similarly on March 30th, 1870. Now, what took place here is that the reason why it was not, in fact, the South wanted to re-enter in that compact simply because they had actually lost the war. So they were actually going to be forced in this way. There are feelings still here in the South that people hate the North for one reason. It wasn't the loss, that is, they lost the Civil War. And I don't even call it Civil War. I consider it a war between the states. It wasn't a civil war. It was a bankers' war, you see. It wasn't anything to do with, that type of thing. So what transpired was that there was martial law in the South. And there were people who were losing their homes, who were being forced by a bayonet to pay their taxes when they didn't have anything. And there were people, what we call carpetbaggers. We know who those are, people, don't we? Those are the so-called bankers who steal from other people. They're leeches on society. Yes, we do. We know who these people are. Think hard. But anyway, they passed 2 amendments in less than 2 years. Now, the key simply is maybe, I know I have a book on one of these particular deals with the 14th Amendment, and I think the other one's on the 16th Amendment, but we won't go there right now. So President Lincoln, by executive order, proclaimed the First Trading with the Enemy Act. President Lincoln stated the government should create, issue, and circulate all currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. Further, he quoted the privilege of creating and issuing money is not only the supreme prerogative of government, but it is the government's greatest opportunity. Afterwards, he was murdered because he defied the bankers by printing interest-free money to pay for the war efforts. So Lincoln tried to correct the problem and had himself in a pickle, so to speak, in many ways. The 14th Amendment brought the free slaves, whose previous owners were private plantation owners, and transferred those slaves under slavery of the government, the assumed 10-mile square jurisdiction of Washington, D.C. You have to look into that more. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with that. We're going to continue on. At any given period of time, the only people in the United States who were under the jurisdiction of the private bifurcated government of the assumed 10-mile squares of Washington, D.C. were the government employees and those who created the social compact, and of course those residing at resident and non-resident aliens within the territories owned by the United States and now the former slaves. The former citizens of those living in the southern portion of the social construct known as the United States for the United States of America, now captured, became 14th Amendment citizens by martial law. A whole lot of things went on during those days, folks. A lot of ugliness took place. Their only express and sole privilege was to vote as granted by the 15th Amendment. The remainder of the compact party people of the posterity related thereto could still invoke the power over their government through original jurisdiction of the Republican side of the Constitution. This is why you have the two forms of government that people are unaware of. One is actually a republic, and the other one is a democracy. This is why you hear congressmen speaking in the building as though they're talking about the old Constitution, and they're speaking another time about the new Constitution. You see, most people get confused by this. So, side of the Constitution only in limited application for any curtailed privilege and immunity effected pursuant thereto by way of the Act of July 27, 1868. Thus, the new form of democracy, that is mob rule, which is what is called martial law, as the government was so styled, operated fully under the authority of private law dictated by the creditor, according to the principles of international public order. So, the United States incorporates in England, the next section here, in 1871, the default again loomed and bankruptcy was imminent. So in 1871, the assumed 10-mile square was incorporated in England. The new military social construct of the United States was still operating under the old familiar known social compact agency named as the United States in Congress assembled, which used the Constitution as their bylaws, not as authority under the Constitution, but as authority over the Constitution. They copyright not only the Constitution, but also many names such as the United States, all caps, or U.S., all caps, or the United States of America in all caps, and the USA also in all caps. When I say all caps, that means all capital letters. There's a difference. It's fictional. We don't do that in language, the English language, okay? But you can look at your bills, and it'll have that on it, all caps. But anyway, continue on. And many other titles as their own intellectual property and secure such property rights by copyright. This is the final blow to the original Constitution as applicable to the trust operating under the U.S. Constitution for the beneficiaries of the original signatures of the social compact created for the benefit by their forefathers. From here on out, the United States, in all caps, was governed entirely by foreign that is in brackets, foreign to the law established by the social compact, private corporate law, dictated by the bankers as physical agents for the private creditors of the intellectual property which they now held in and under copyright with. The creditors extending the right to use such copyright to their esquires by and through the crown. And it has it in all brackets here with British Accreditation Register, which is a bar international agents, that is. Then it has attorneys in brackets in association with the Vatican by treaty as the executor of the Vatican treasure. So you see what's going on here. The United States is no longer an independent country. This is why it was passed. The 13th Amendment, the missing 13th Amendment, was passed. It was as an amendment. But these shysters, as I call them, chose to do what they wanted to do, and they keep people from actually not knowing the truth. So if your government was supposedly good, let's just get to the point here. So it's good, then why did this already happen early on when this country was started? You see, think about it. You think bad things happen today. They do. But this is where all the rotten apples start. And it's all to do with lawyers. It's all to do with lawyers who are bought and paid for by a foreign enemy. So more bankruptcy reorganizations takes place. Define the word bylaws. Then in 1909, default loomed once more. The U.S. government went to the Crown of England and asked for an extension on time. This extension was granted for another 20 years on several conditions. One of the conditions was that the United States were forced to allow the creditors to establish a new national bank. So what I follow is a guy named David Robinson. He pointed this out, that the United States, and I don't know if it's going to drive with what here is, so this is what I've been taught. The United States first had 7 years to pay back the debts. Okay, originally that was going to be with the French. But if you understand anything here, if the United States had actually won the war, why are they paying reparations back to France? After all, the United States and France are our quote-unquote allies. So if they'd have been victors, guess who would have paid for that? It would have been the British who would have paid the U.S. and the French back. But they didn't. So someone's lying to us, okay? So is it possible that basically the United States lost? You betcha. And so the United States, after that 7 years took place, which was, I'm trying to think with the timeline here. I think it's 1789. And so with that, they said, that's cool. We'll give you 10 times that appropriate time. So instead of 7 years, you have 70 years to do it. And that took place in 1859. And guess what? They wasn't able to pay it. And so what transpired there was simply another 70 years. And you see, and the interest is going up and making it more expensive for the government to pay it off, you see. And that time period came in 1929, you see. And the next one was 1999. And I won't go any more on that. That's his theory about what took place. So we'll continue on. So establish a new national bank. This was done in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Bank, along with the 16th Amendment, the collection of income tax, which was enacted in February 25th, 1913. And the 17th Amendment, enacted in May 31, 1913, was the condition for the continuing extension of time allowed by the creditors for the United States to continue to exist as a functional entity within the international public order. The 16th and 17th Amendments further reduced the state's power by removing the state's legislative right to appoint senators directly. You see how this is a way, that would be what we call a Republican form of government. But what they've done is simply they've enacted what we call the democracy, which simply is mob rule. The United States, in all caps, adopted the Babylonian system, that being the most clever way to control the mob of people collectively to keep and control political power, thereby controlling any future attempt by contractual obligations, the ability by the beneficiaries to attempt to overcome and to restore their former system of government to which their forefathers had sacrificed their lives, wealth, and their sacred honor to give them. Whether or not their forefathers' actions were right or wrong, the fruit of their labor still exists, with those of us who still study our predecessors' actions for the benefit of hopefully avoiding the same mistakes. The next section here is called the First World War. In 1917, peoples of all walks of life were again drafted in the First World War for the sole purpose of the beginning of centralized global power under a new world order. This was to greatly affect the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of all individuals living upon the face of planet Earth, then, now, and in the future. The so-called debt accumulated so it became impossible for anyone to pay off their debts in the lawful currency of the United States by 1929. It also enhanced the War Powers Act that President Lincoln, by Executive Order 100, put in place during his presidency, that is, during his presidency. This War Power Act was reinforced and became the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. This will become more important later on. So in other words, Lincoln started with this Trading with the Enemy Act in his time, and then they reiterated this later on under the Wilson administration. So the next section is called the Great Depression. We all know what happened in 1929. This was the year of the stock market crash and the beginning of the Great Depression. The Great Depression, that is the stock market crash, moved billions of dollars from the people to the bankers' warehouses, that is their banks. They also removed various forms of cash or certificates backed by lawful coinage, that is gold and silver of the United States, then in circulation for the people's use. Those who still possessed any cash invested in high interest yielding, that is, treasury bonds, driven higher by increased demand. As a result, even more cash was removed from circulation for the general public use. There was not enough cash left in circulation to buy the goods being produced. Production came to a halt as inventories overcrowded the market. So what is happening here is similar in some ways, except it's far worse now than it was almost 100 years ago. The value, what they've done is that they limit the amount of cash that's available, and that took place under the Federal Reserve System. Meaning that there was less money there meant that simply is not only that corporations or companies could no longer borrow money to continue to stay in business. So they eliminated competition that way. They also allowed, with that happening, took what we call a steal for other companies to destroy their competitors. And suddenly that the competitors no longer could get money to make it or to provide for themselves. They were now in trouble, and another group of competitors bought them out. You see. It also meant that people were out of work. But people were not in an enormous amount of debt. The only people who suffered was those who played in the market who were in debt. And many of those people realized they would never be able to pay it off. And a lot of them actually killed themselves. So production, as I said, production came to a halt as inventory overcrowded the market. That is, they had too much there. There were more products on the market than there was cash to buy them. Prices deflated, that is, plummeted, and industry plunged into bankruptcy, throwing millions of more people out of work and out of cash. Foreclosure on homes, factories, businesses, and farms rose to the highest level in the history, not only locally, but globally. A mere dime was literally salvation to many families now living on the streets. Billions of people globally lost everything they had, keeping only the clothes on their back. This also give you an idea how, even though it was, houses back then were probably only $4,000 or $5,000, if they were even that much to build. And what transpired simply is they didn't have anything. And they weren't able to pay those mortgages off. And it's really sad. That's not the way it should be, folks. It really isn't. This is my take on it. There's this system of banking is just simply a way of robbing people. That's all it is. It's a monopoly. No, yeah, so they're playing Monopoly. That is the game, and most of other people have no idea they're playing that game in order to take over everything. So let me continue here. In Europe in 1930, the international bankers declared several nations bankrupt, including the United States. And in 1933, when President Roosevelt was elected and took office, his first act as the president was to declare public that the United States was bankrupt. He also, what's the word I'm trying to think of? He was declared emergency. That's what they always do. So when they do that, emergency, they actually no longer obey the laws, the bylaws of what you're supposed to do, the procedures. They just run amok over those. So the United States, he further went on to issue his presidential executive order on March 5th, 1933. Anybody out there that knows some astrology here, why don't you look back to March 5th, 1933 and tell me what really was going on astrologically, astronomy wise. That is, astrologically, why did it took place on that date? That I'm just curious of that. Okay, that all United States citizens/citizens must turn in all their gold in return for Federal Reserve notes. This was passed into law by the Congress on June 5th, 1933. So this took what we call, that's another interesting date. March, so it's April, May, 3 months later, they passed it. Okay. Okay, so we continue on House/Senate Joint Resolution 192. This was also in 1933. I'm going to read this, so please listen. All the people, whether subject to the jurisdiction or not, deluded by a system of public education, assume the position of such status of citizenship and turn in all of their gold in their possession at that time. Why? Were we really U.S. citizens? No, we were still a sovereign people until that time. That's what people didn't realize what was going on. We just thought that we were required to turn in all the gold in our possession. Only those people living in Washington, D.C. and the 14th Amendment citizens and the citizens per the Article 4 of the U.S. Constitution, that is, the beneficiaries of the social compact, were so required. We were still sovereign, that is, non-members of the social compact. We were not under the jurisdiction of the United States of America, which incorporated in 1871. So let me explain something else when he says which incorporated. Well, the United States of America is all in what we call proper way, so it's not all caps. The United States itself of America is supposed to be a country, but what has happened simply is we've lost our country and it's become a corporation. And that's because simply as we spent money we didn't have, and we wasn't able to pay back what we call the debts. So we were incorporated because we became bankrupt. This took place in 1871. A lot of that has to do with what I call the war between the states, also split deal. So this is what you have to follow here and understand. These words are critical for you to dig deeper into why these things happen. So when people turned in their gold, they just recognized and or volunteered into the jurisdiction of the assumed 10-mile square jurisdiction of Washington, D.C. and their laws by joint acquisition. Pursuant thereto, such people became 14th Amendment U.S. citizens by tacit agreement. That's TACIT agreement. In other words, they submitted. What's the word? They didn't complain. They really didn't even know what was going on, to be honest with you people. That's what's happened. Plus, the educational system that's going on here is not telling people who they are and what they're about. You see, people have been brainwashed. Continued. Their posterity, which includes many of us in the social net of subterfuge, were required to deliver all birth registers to the government. In their place were returned certificates of title, birth, the title to our bodies, that were then registered Department of Commerce. Interesting, it went on the commercial register. In its subdepartmental known as the Bureau of Vital Statistics. This title to our bodies, all of our property, and all of our future labor. So what's happening here, you are becoming a slave. That's what it's all about here. Because they have now title of your body. All of our property, as your land, and all of our future labor, the future, was pledged to the international bankers as security for the money owed in bankruptcy by the corporate United States under Title 28 USC Code 3002, parentheses, parentheses A. All this was done under the authority of commercial law, that is Babylonian law, by and through secure transaction governing secured interest in documents of title. It would be interesting to look at Babylon and its law, because simply is that it fell from within. It was attacked, but it also fell from within. Most people are unaware of that. A certain group of people allowed that to happen. It surely wasn't the Babylonians. So through security transaction governing security interest in title documents of title, all people were not in bankruptcy. Only the corporate United States and the various global government corporate nations, and the capital word United States here is all caps, construct globally, which has become the pawns of the international bankers, were in bankruptcy. Through such global social subterfuge and schemes fostered upon all walks of life, most people were duped into believing themselves a party to the various government social compacts, and thereby a party to the bankruptcy of the various bankrupt nations. They fooled the people. People didn't realize what was going on. It's a really sad thing. Still happens today, folks. All peoples continues to believe now and then, and that they are even each individually and collectively a member of such a say compact or construct. The foundation of truth, this is all underlined here, the foundation of truth is far from the illusion people suffer under. All peoples have never had, now or then, a contractual nexus to such compacts or constructs. Period. All walks of life have been continually deceived and educated from childhood to believe that they must give sole allegiance to, and that's all underlined, for whatever unsound, non-existent contractual reasons, to be controlled by those who form such compacts or constructs. Education itself, most of the time, folks, is propaganda. We must remember, however, that it was only the politicians and the posterity of the original signature members of the social compact known as the U.S. Constitution, and the assumed 10 mile squares of Washington, D.C., being the United States Corporation in all caps, and other such various government constructs throughout the planet at that time, globally speaking, that went into bankruptcy. It was specifically relative to no other people or social compact which was not a party to such a, or did not go along with the social scheme of the time, so to speak. And let me interject here. Lysander Spooner speaks about this whole idea simply back in his book. He just basically says simply, if we didn't sign the Constitution, we're not a part of it. And what he was trying to point out simply is that we're not a part of it, and those who, it was to their posterity, but basically those who already died, it was for them because they just signed it. It had no contract for the rest of the people who were living afterwards. That's his theory. I see what he's saying here. I don't know if I agree with everything Lysander Spooner is, but Lysander Spooner understood some of these things far deeper than most people have. And I would suggest you actually read some of Lysander Spooner, a brilliant man, brilliant man. He breaks it down in what I would call no nonsense, what you call for the average person, average Joe that can understand what's going on. It doesn't make it up here that most people cannot understand. Let's continue. In the years following the independence of the several colonies, let's see, several colonies, I'm looking here, where am I at here? Several colonies in the north of the Western Hemisphere, a close business relation had developed between the cotton-growing aristocrats in the South and the cotton manufacturers in England. The European bankers decided that this business connection was the Union and or social compact's Achilles heel, door through which the young Republican form of government could be successfully attacked and overcome. The Illustrated Universal History of 1878, page 504, tells us that the southern states swarmed with British agents. So the South was already being, quote unquote, set up. These conspired with local politicians to work against the best interests of the social compact known as the United States. Carefully sown and nurtured propaganda developed an open rebellion and result in secession of the people of the Compact Party state known as South Carolina on December 29, 1860. Within weeks, the people, that is the beneficiary as the posterity of the original signatories to the Social Compact of 6 Compact Party states, joined the conspiracy against the Union and broke away to form the new social compact construct known as the Confederate States of America, with Jefferson Davis as president. The plotters raided armies, seized forts, arsenals, mints, and other Union property. Even members of President Buchanan's cabinet conspired to destroy the Union by damaging the so-called public credit and working to bankrupt the Social Compact Union. President Buchanan claimed to deplore secession but took no steps to check it, even when a U.S. ship was fired upon by the South Carolina shore batteries. Shortly thereafter, Abraham Lincoln became president, being inaugurated on March 4, 1861. Lincoln immediately ordered a blockade of southern ports to cut off supplies that were pouring in from Europe. The official date for the start of the Civil War is given as April 12, 1861, when Fort Sumter in South Carolina was bombarded by Confederates, but it obviously began at a much earlier date. In fact, in December 1861, large number of European troops, that is British, French, and Spanish, poured into Mexico in defiance of the Monroe Doctrine. This, together with widespread European aid to the Confederacy, strongly indicated that the Crown was preparing to enter the war. The outlook for the North and the future of the Union was bleak indeed. In this hour of extreme crisis, it has been said by those who remain anonymous that President Abraham Lincoln appealed to the Crown, perennial enemy Russia, for assistance. When the envelope allegedly containing Mr. urgent appeal was given to Tsar Alexander II, it has been postulated that he weighed it unopened in his hand and stated, "Before we open this paper or know its contents, we grant any request it may contain." I don't know if I would agree with that, but anyway, continue. Unannounced, a Russian fleet under Admiral Levetsky steamed into New York's harbor on September 24, 1863, and anchored there. The Russian Pacific Fleet under Admiral Popov arrived in San Francisco on October 12th. Of this Russian act, Gillian Wells said, "They arrived at the high tide of the Confederacy and the low tide of the North, causing England and France to hesitate long enough to turn the tide for the North." It's based upon a book called The Empire of the City, page 90. History, if it can be found in truth, may reveal, if the truth ever comes to light, that the Rothschild family was heavily involved in financing both sides of the Civil War. Lincoln put a damper on their activities when, in 1862 and 63 that is, he refused to pay the exorbitant rates of interest demanded by the Rothschilds family. Mr. Lincoln issued by executive order via the new military social construct a presumed constitutionality authorizing interest-free United States notes. Allegedly for this and other acts of patriotism, Mr. Lincoln was shot dead in cold blood by John Wilkes Booth on April 14, 1865. Now, you're observing some things here, folks. Many things are occurring on the month of April in here. You watch this, look at the dates of what happened when the South, when they attacked such and such, it's April such and such, and then here, and then with this part here taking place again, it's in April 12th when the Civil War started. And you see this happening here. It's kind of interesting to see this. But anyway, let's see where we're at now. was shot down in cold blood on April 14th, with just 5 days after Lincoln surrendered to Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. Booth's granddaughter, Isloza Forrester, states in this one mad act that Mr. Lincoln's assassin had been in close contact with mysterious Europeans prior to the slaying and had made at least one trip to Europe. Following the killing, John Wilkes Booth was whisked away to safety by members of the Knights of Golden Circle, according to the author. Booth lived for many years following his disappearance. Now, the next section we go into is HJR, which stands for House Joint Resolution 192. This is something that you need to pay attention to because it's key. Okay. On March 9, 1933, House, that is the Second Third Congress, Session 1, Chapter 1, page number 83, first paragraph, third sentence, it states, under the new law, the money is issued to the banks in return for government obligations, bills of exchange, drafts, notes, trade acceptance, and bankers' acceptance. The money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it is backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. So if you understand what is happening here, it's saying that basically the people are now becoming the collateral of the country. And he also talks about the homes or other property, so this is land. House Joint Resolution 192, June 5, 1933, states that one cannot demand a certain form of currency that they want to receive if it is dollar for dollar, as all currency is your credit. That's in all caps. I'll state it again. HJR 192, June 5, 1933, states that one cannot demand a certain form of currency that they want to receive if it is a dollar for dollar, as all currency is your credit. If they do, they are in breach of the contract of HJR 192. You have already accepted this contract, and now they must perform. What he's saying here is that the currency is based upon your credit. What he's saying also, if you'll notice, if you open a bank account, they create money out of nothing because you are the credit. That's what this is talking about, okay? Not a debtor, as they keep saying this all the time to you. When you get a credit card, I've said this before, if you get a credit card, it comes from your trust. That's where it comes from. It comes from your Social Security card. No, it comes from your trust, but it is in the that account. Pursuant to this contractual resolution, it's found in the bond by the corporation that you are discharging the debt pursuant to the HJR 192. They must give you a letter of release or payment in full in the form of a discharge. If they ask you where does this money come from to pay for the item, you should correct them and say there is no money because the United States, all caps, and all municipals are in bankruptcy, and the only currency that exists is that of all the people's credit. You could also tell them the U.S. Trust Fund is where all the people's property has been collateralized to create the credit of their nation. Get that through your thick skulls. If they appear confused, show them a copy of the 73rd Congress, March 9, 1933, where it says, the new money will be backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and properties of all the people in the nation. In their own writings, they agree all people in the nation are the creditors. They would be so impressed and shocked that they have actually witnessed a creditor who knows his business that they in turn would probably conduct themselves more respectful and businesslike towards you. To understand how the money system works today, one must remember the 73rd Congress, March 9, 1933. The money, that is the Federal Reserve notes, will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it is backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. The money so issued will not have one penny of gold coverage behind it because because it is really not needed. You are the credit, you are the collateral. You see? Since the national emergency in banking, otherwise known as bankruptcy, occurred in 1933, our money is credit, your credit, backed by your collateral of your promise. When you sign any promise to pay, it becomes money. Your signature creates money. What is the difference between Federal Reserve notes and the promissory note you gave the bank? They both represent your credit. Only one thing is different. The bank failed to record your promissory note when they recorded the deed of trust. Therefore, it is not registered in the public register like Federal Reserve notes are. Could this be considered fraudulent use of Could this be considered fraudulent use of a foreign security? You better believe it is. The next section I'm going through is called International Bankers Pursue Their Goal. Undaunted by their initial failure to destroy the social compact of the United States, their international bankers pursued their objective with relentless zeal. Between the end of Civil War and 1914, their main agent in the United States was Kuhn, that is spelled K-U-H-N, Loeb, L-O-E-B, and Company, and the J.P. Morgan Company. A brief history of Kuhn, Loeb, and Company appeared in Newsweek magazine on February 1st, 1936. Abraham Kuhn and Solomon Loeb were general merchandise merchants in Lafayette, Indiana in 1850. As usual, in newly settled regions, most transactions were on credit. They soon found out that they were bankers. In 1867, they established Kuhn, Loeb and Company Bankers in New York City and took in a young German immigrant called Jacob Schiff. That's S-C-H-I-F-F as partner. Young Schiff had important financial connections in Europe. After 10 years, Jacob Schiff was head of Kuhn, Loeb and Company. Kuhn having returned under Schiff's guidance, the House brought European capital into contact with American industry. Important financial connections in Europe were the Rothschilds and their German representatives, the M.M. Warburg Company of Hamburg and Amsterdam. Within 20 years, the Rothschilds, through their Warburg-Schiff connection, had provided the capital that enabled John D. Rockefeller to greatly expand his Standard Oil empire. They also financed the activities of Edward Harriman, that is, he was a railroad magnate, and Andrew Carnegie as the steel magnate. As it turned to the 20th century, the Rothschilds, not satisfied with the progress being made by their American operations, sent one of their own top experts. His name is Paul Warburg, over to New York to take direct charge of their assault upon the only true champion of individual liberty and prosperity, the United States. As a hearing of the House Committee on Banking and Currency in 1913, Warburg revealed that he was a member of the banking firm of Kuhn, Loeb and Company. I came to this country in 1902, having been born and educated in the banking business in Hamburg, Germany, and studied banking in London and Paris and have gone all around the world. In the late 1800s, people didn't study banking in London and all around the world unless they had a special mission to perform, ? Early in 1907, Jacob Schiff, the Rothschild-owned boss of Kuhn, Loeb and Company, in a speech to the New York Chamber of Commerce, warned that unless we have a central bank with adequate control of credit resources, this country is going to undergo the most severe and far-reaching money panic in its history. Give me a second here. It's interesting, this is not in the book here, it's interesting that when he made this statement, they were able to do it. They didn't play games. They had the power to do whatever they wanted to do. They had their minions all around. People will do all kinds of things for money, folks. They just simply will do it. They'll destroy their neighbors. They'll do all kinds of things for the sake of money. Doesn't mean that money is evil. It means the love of money is evil. Shortly thereafter, the United States plunged into a well-orchestrated monetary crisis that had all earmarks of a skillful planned Rothschild job. The ensuing panic financially mined tens of thousands of innocent people across the country and made billions for the banking elite. Their purpose for the crisis was twofold: to make a financial killing for the insiders and to impress on all people the great need for a central bank. Paul Warburg told the Banking and Currency Committee in the panic of 1907, the first suggestion I made was, let us have a national clearinghouse, that is the central bank. The Aldrich plan for a central bank contained many things that are simply fundamentally rules of banking. Your aim must be the same. Digging deep into their bag of deceitful practices, the international bankers pulled off their greatest coup to date: the creation of a privately owned Federal Reserve System which placed control of the finances of the United States securely in the hands of the power-crazy money monopolist named Paul Warburg became the Fed's first chairman. It has been alleged that Congressman Charles Lindbergh put his finger firmly on the truth with his prophet that when it is profited that he is presumed stated just after the Federal Reserve Act was passed by a depleted Congress on December 23, 1913. And incidentally, that was done, that took place in Congress when quite a few congressmen had gone home for a Christmas break. The act established the most gigantic trust on earth. When the president, that is Wilson, signed this bill, the invisible government of the monetary power will be legalized. The greatest crime of the ages is perpetrated by this banking and currency bill. No wonder his son, that is Charles Lindbergh's son, was kidnapped and killed. So, and we're going to stop here pretty much because it's probably about an hour I've been on here. And what I want to say something else was this. This is Lindbergh, whose son, let's see if I got this right. No, this is after. No, this is kind of out of order here. Yes, okay. So there are two Lindberghs. The father is from the state of Minnesota, and his son is the one who actually flew the Spirit of St. Louis. The Spirit of St. Louis guy, that is, he was going to run for president of the United States against Roosevelt. Mr. Lindbergh had a well-known name and people respected him. He was considered a hero. And what they did is he was running for president. He was going to run for president, and basically Roosevelt was going to have a hard time winning. And so what they did was they wanted him to no longer run. So what they did, they kidnapped his son and then killed him. Now, folks, when good people try to do something and evil is that way, you need to see it for what it is. Okay? You need to realize who these people are. These people will do anything. They don't care. And so what happened was Charles Lindbergh, the aviator, he bowed out of the election. He was brokenhearted. Who wouldn't be? And then what transpired simply is he did try he got involved a little bit more in what he called the American First Movement, because he tried to keep us out of the foreign wars. It was none of our business, folks, in the First World War. No one attacked the United States. No one attacked us, period. The Second World War, if you understand anything about the Second World War, it's very simple. Mr. Roosevelt chose to move all the military, that is the assets of the Navy, from San Diego to Honolulu, Hawaii, in order to make it easier striking distance for the Japanese. They wanted Japan to get into the war so they could actually declare war. You see. And I read some things about Roosevelt. That is the enormous pressure that was put on him. And I'm not. He's not a good president either, folks. There are not many good presidents because they're bought and paid for. Period. And so they considered actually attacking China in order to get the oil reserves there. The pressure from Rockefeller was great, and they said, "Well, we'll get it. We'll get it in our due time, so to speak." And so Japan went there to get it, and you got to connect the dots here, folks. You just got to understand that everything, it's all about commerce. You see, if it, money, it's about commerce. And this is why the wars are fought. It's to steal from other countries, to destroy their country, yes, but also to take what they have, or to make sure they don't get anything. And part of that could be shared with also the story of Libya. Same thing, the United States and Britain, who are the great war heroes. I mean, the war criminals, they're not great, folks. They're war criminals. Both countries are. We're on the wrong side, folks. We've always been on the wrong side. This country has for a long time. I know you don't want to hear that because the truth hurts. But the truth does tell you that basically this is why we're in a fucking mess right now in this country. And I don't know how we're going to get out of it because this is over. This is going to be it, folks. The whole country economy is going to fall. And with that, it's going to bring down the whole rest of the world. And with the whole thing that happens, they will have their world government. That's why I'm telling you now to wake up, be aware of what's going on. And there's so many groups out here that simply don't want to deal with this, meaning that they don't see that as being important because they're occupied. They don't want to deal with reality. You see. My background is why I'm here. I was a political science major in college. I studied international relations. I had interest in that. Always had interest in foreign countries, their cuisines, their food, their traditions, their music. All of that was something I had interest in with them, other countries. I want to know how their country was started and how they worked out certain things. All this stuff, which is, and how do we respond to people as being a very 18 or 19-year-old kid, thinking that we were doing the right thing and being involved in other countries because the programming was taught to me that, this country is going to follow the communists, and most likely it was not. But they used that card many times for people who are conservatives, you see. And so we're headed for really bad times in this country, folks. Um, there's no excuse, that's why you need to be prepared for the worst time. The sad part is that most people are not even prepared for what's coming. They know something's going on. And you got to go back here a little bit here in 2008 when all this stuff happened before. But it's far worse now than ever before. And you have to understand simply we have very corrupt people in office. I'm trying to think of the what is the word? Is it Lord so-and-so, I'm trying to think of his name. Absolute power corrupts. That's what it is. Absolute power corrupts. And that's what we have here in this country. But it's also not just here. It's in all countries, the West, and how they lead all this. And this is part of, if you look at what I've also shared with the Tavistock deal, how they've brainwashed people, that people have no idea what's coming, and have no idea who the enemy is or anything of that nature. Many people did things of this nature because they believe in actually, they thought they believed in communism, but that was a front. It's those who are behind the curtain, folks, are the ones who are destroying the whole world because they want it all. They have an absolute hate of humanity because I don't think they actually are humanity, even themselves. Something has tainted them so deeply that they don't even have a conscience at all, right and wrong. And it's come out open. It's right here in your face, in many ways. And I have many people who come to me and says, or have told me simply, well, everything's going to work out. That'd be nice, but I don't think it is going to work out, folks. Reality is staring you right in the face. So, part of me, my background, my dad owned a business. I ran the business as either, in many ways, I was involved in as a salesman, involved in, I knew how to run it, so to speak. That is, I knew what to order, inventory, pay the bills, pay the employees. And I've been involved in political groups, that is parties. I was involved in the Republican Party on the college campus where I was at. And then I was involved in another political party, a third party, because I realized that the Republican Party was just as guilty as the Democratic Party was. And those of you who think there's a difference, there's not a damn bit of difference between the two. One group talks and the other group does. Republican talks all the time. They're going to do this and that. When it comes down to it, they don't do shit. Democrats, they talk, they do it. They're straightforward and they do it. What you have is a group of people, what we call rhinos, Republicans in name only. They are not, they're bought and paid for, period. The Democrats are what I call the progressives. They are the ones who are, there are no good guys here, folks. That's what you've got to understand. You've got to figure it out. But the key is to how to figure it out is very clear. You don't vote. Simple as that. You don't give your consent by voting for what you see around you. Because a total, when you think about it deeply, you are giving your consent one way or the other. No matter if you lost the election recently or won the election, it doesn't mean a damn bit of difference, folks, because you are part of the system. You know that the government could not rule in this country without the consent of the people. You can't get that in your head, can you? Because they have programmed you so much that you see the other guy as a bad guy and the guy you're supporting is a good guy, when in reality, neither side is good at all. You can't get it in your head, can you? Because your ego is in the way. You can't admit that you're wrong, can you? And so we're in this predicament. And, only thing I know simply is I share this because I feel it's valuable for a few people that if they have ears to hear, can hear it and understand what's coming. And those that don't are going to miss it. They're not going to understand what's going on, and they won't be able to even see what's coming because they don't want to know those things. They put their head in the sand and pretend that everything's okay. I think that's the reason why I'm here, is to speak out against what I see injustice in so many ways. My personality doesn't like people who are liars at all. It doesn't matter who they are. It can be a little white lie or it can be a giant black one, but I don't like liars. I hate liars. You see. Just tell me the truth, will you? You see. So when I share with you, it's because of what I've already learned in the past, in my interests, in the books that I read, in what type of person I am, personality-wise, who I am, you see. My word is good enough, you see. Not many people do that anymore, folks. That's the reason why we're in a hell of a mess as it is now. So that'll be my conclusion tonight on sharing with you. We'll take up the next section, which is going to be the what we call the United States of America. The U is actually not capitalized at all. It's not in all caps. And then we'll go into that particular part of the redemption manual. The idea of this particular manual is basically to help you to get out of this system and to get into your trust is what it's about. And be able to be self-sufficient and to unleash yourself the chain of slavery. So that's why I do this. There may be a few, because I don't think there are many that really care. And that's fine. That's not what I'm called or what's happening or whatever. That's not the point. The point simply is you got to do what's right no matter what. So anyway, I appreciate you listening. Thank you for your time, and I wish you a good night, and you take care.